Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Church of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Christ Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 139. We're dealing with Christus Dominus 36 and 37 on Bishops Should Meet Together. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we concluded Chapter 2, talking about bishops and religious priests should seek harmonious relationships that serve the good of souls while maintaining the specific charisms of specific religious. So today, we're starting Chapter 3, concerning bishops for the common good of many churches. And 3.1 is the section we start immediately, which is synods, council, and especially episcopal conferences. This will take us 2 days, right? And so today, we are going to cover the kind of history of bishops meeting regularly and the encouragement to start that back up, especially in episcopal conferences. So let's get straight into paragraph 36. It has 2 subparagraphs. A is about regular meetings of bishops, where the historical norm, it talks about the history. And B is talking about how Vatican II wants to renew this idea and start this up again more often. So let's read A. From the very first century of the church, bishops, as rulers of the individual churches, were deeply moved by the communion of fraternal charity and zeal from the universal mission entrusted to the apostles. And so they pooled their abilities and their wills for the common good and for the welfare of the individual churches. Thus came into being synods, provincial councils, and plenary councils, in which bishops established for various churches the way to be followed in teaching the truths of faith and ordering ecclesiastical discipline. Right, so this is talking about this long history. You know, if you read Denzinger, you get all these different councils, different regional ones in different parts of Europe and things like that. Denzinger, just a minute. If you go way back to the first 2 days, we were talking about Dr. Robert Stevie. He's the editor of that, and it's kind of the compilation of all important magisterial texts, right? And so a number of those are from these kind of meetings outside an ecumenical council. Like obviously we have the ecumenical councils in the church, and those are the final definitive ones. But these ones are of various different types. You know, they talk about plenary councils, provincial councils, etc. And they're relatively more local here, right? So this is not necessarily a worldwide ecumenical council, but it's a local council of this area, often for pastoral rights, right? It's, coordinating the pastoral aspect here, right? Certain things of how we do pastoral work in the United States are not the same as they are in Nigeria. And it's up to the U.S. bishops to talk about and work out how those things are done better here, right? Because and it's up to the Nigerian bishops to figure that out for Nigeria, because I don't understand the culture of Nigeria. I've not lived in it. I've not studied it. I think I understand the American and Canadian culture relatively well, but I do not understand the culture of most other nations to the degree that I would be great as a missionary there, right? And so it also is up sometimes to confront specific errors, right? When you go to Denzinger, because Denzinger is a doctrinal thing, it does give cases where specific local errors were dealt with in these councils as well. So moving on to subparagraph B, it just asks, Vatican II is just asking for renewal of these, right? So let's read the text. This sacred ecumenical synod earnestly desires that the venerable institution of synods and councils flourish with fresh vigor. In such a way, faith will be deepened and discipline preserved, more fittingly and efficaciously in the various churches as the needs of the times require. Right, so this is just saying, hey, we got to get back to these. We want to get back to having more of these local councils or synods or whatever, right, so that we can make decisions, so that we can work together, right? We need to adapt into modern times, right, because certain things are going to be different, right? For example, one of the things now we have such great transportation, right? So, for example, we have an annual meeting of all the U.S. bishops. And without the kind of modern tech of planes and communications, they all get the emails with all of it beforehand. I'm not sure if that might be a little bit too burdensome on some of the further up bishops. Maybe you'd want to meet every few years nationally and more locally on other years, right? But we don't live in that. So moving on to paragraph 37. Paragraph 37 has 2 subparagraphs, but subparagraph B is literally one line that's just introducing paragraph 38. So we'll just read this as one. And it's basically it asks us to the nations to continue or to establish episcopal conferences or bishops' conferences. They tend to use the word episcopal conferences, like in Canada and the U.S., we have the CCCB and the USCCB, which is the United States or Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops, which use the bishops' conference term, but it means the same thing. Anyway, so let's read it. In these days especially, bishops frequently are unable to fulfill their office effectively and fruitfully unless they develop a common effort involving constant growth and harmony and closeness of ties with other bishops. Episcopal conferences already established in many nations have furnished outstanding proofs of a more fruitful apostolate. Therefore, this sacred synod considers it to be supremely fitting that everywhere bishops belong to the same nation or region form an association which would meet at fixed times. Thus, when the insights of prudence and experience have been shared and the views exchanged, there will emerge a holy union of energies in the service of the common good of the churches. B. Wherefore, the Sacred Synod decrees the following concerning the Episcopal conferences. That's it, right? So B is just basically we're introducing 38. I'll probably read that again tomorrow because that's kind of the introduction to 38, even though it's technically in 37. So this is somewhat new to Vatican II. It was not common beforehand. A few countries had established national bishops' conferences, but this was definitely not the norm that they met regularly, right? And now they meet at fixed times. They meet, the USCCB meets every year, whereas, for example, the American councils, if you want to talk about local councils, from 1852 to 1884, all the bishops of the United States met 3 times in Baltimore in what are called the plenary councils of Baltimore, which set in motion a number of important things for Catholics in this country, as far as Catholic education, as far as the commission, the Baltimore Catechism, as far as aspects of clerical dress in the country and things like that, right? And so I think that's important, but I also think one of the things today is there's so much cultural exchange and so much that's not necessarily local, right? Whereas before it was much more local, so it was much easier for each diocese to operate on its own, right? For example, I'm recording this in San Jose. We have Oakland, we have San Francisco right next to it, so at least we have this area, right? But at the same time, I'm moving from one side of the country to the other in the middle of this year when I'm teaching this class, right? I'm not teaching this class, when I'm giving this podcast, right? And it's a very similar culture, and you're not going to experience any interruption by me being on one side of the country or the other, right? And so this is something where a lot of this national level can help. And although not really big in U.S. and Canada, internationally, there are at least 2 ones I know of, which are Latin America and Europe, who have just super one above the kind of coordinating among the various bishops' conferences of the continent. So this mutual exchange can help build up the church, and it's good, and bishops should meet like this. So thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast. You can donate to help StarCross produce it and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one time, monthly, or join the StarCross Patreon. Tomorrow we're going to continue with the next paragraph of Christus Dominus, which is 38 on Episcopal conferences. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II to provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. For more information on the podcast, such as playlists for individual documents and a reading plan, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook or X.
Amen.